Nobody saw this coming. Not the pundits, not the bookmakers, not even the most devoted followers of women's tennis. Eala, a 20-year-old left-hander from Quezon City in the Philippines, has been quietly building something so ferocious, so structurally sound, that the entire WTA Tour is about to be put on notice heading into the Linz Open. And the question burning through every tennis forum and group chat on the planet is almost absurd in how seriously people are now taking it. Could she genuinely trouble Aryna Sabalenka? Let that sink in for a moment. Sabalenka, the woman sitting at the absolute summit of the sport with a record of 23 wins and a single loss in 2026, the freshly crowned Sunshine double champion. The four-time major winner who dismantled Coco Gauff in the Miami final just days ago. And yet, in certain corners of the tennis world, whispers have turned into genuine conversations about whether Eala, this fearless, tactically fascinating player who trains where Rafael Nadal once sharpened his own weapons, has the toolkit to do what almost nobody else has managed this season. To crack the code. To disrupt the machine. To understand why this conversation has moved from fantasy to possibility, you have to rewind the clock and follow the thread of a story that barely anyone outside Southeast Asia was paying attention to just 18 months ago. Eala's journey to this point is not a straight line. It zigzags through juniors, through grueling ITF qualifiers, through the kind of quiet defeats that never make the highlight reels, but that forge something inside a competitor that talent alone cannot produce. Born into a sports-oriented family in the Philippines, she picked up a racket at 4 years old. By 13, she had relocated across the globe to train at the Rafael Nadal Academy in Mallorca, Spain. 13. Try to imagine what that requires, not just of the player, but of the family, of the infrastructure, of the belief that this kid from a country with virtually no professional tennis tradition could carve out a place on the world's biggest stages. The academy shaped her. It did not remake her, because Eala's instincts were always there, the court awareness, the capacity to read angles, the natural hand speed that comes with being a left-hander. But Mallorca gave her the physical foundation and the competitive hardness that separates potential from product. She graduated in 2023, diploma in hand, and set about the business of climbing rankings that don't care where you come from or what your story is, only whether you can win matches under pressure. Her 2025 season was the year everything started to crystallize. She became the first Filipino player in the Open era to win a main draw Grand Slam match, defeating 14th-seeded Clara Tauson at the US Open in a result that sent an entire nation into delirium. She saved 5 match points in that tournament. 5. That kind of number tells you something about her nervous system, about the wiring that sits underneath the technique. Players who save 5 match points at a Grand Slam and still advance are not merely talented. They are built differently in the places you cannot see. By early 2026, the trajectory had bent upwards so sharply that it became impossible to ignore. At the Auckland semi-final, she pushed Sinew Wang to 3 sets. She won a WTA 125 title. She reached a career-high ranking of world number 29 in mid-March, becoming the highest-ranked Filipino player in WTA history. The first from her country to crack the top 30. The first to register multiple wins over top 10 opponents in a single calendar stretch. Every milestone she reached, she was the first of her kind to reach it, and that accumulated weight of historical significance does something to a player's self-belief that is almost impossible to quantify from the outside. Then came the Sunshine Swing. At Indian Wells, seeded 31st, she outlasted the dangerous Dayana Yastremska in a night match that finished close to midnight. A 3-set war decided 7-5 in the third. The kind of physical and emotional marathon that either breaks you or baptizes you. Coco Gauff retired against her in the next round. And then Linda Noskova ended her run in the 4th round with a comprehensive 6-2, 6-0 scoreline that served as a brutal reminder of where the ceiling still sits when the opposition cranks up the pace. At Miami, she beat Hailey Baptiste when her opponent retired, then toppled 6th-seeded Jasmine Paolini, a former Roland Garros finalist, 6-1, 7-6. She dispatched Sorana Cîrstea in straight sets. Then Karolina Muchova, the Czech stylist with the velvet touch, dismantled her 6-0, 6-2 in the round of 16. Again, the ceiling. Again, the wall. But also, again, the proof that Eala belongs at this level, that her presence in the second week of WTA 1000 events is no longer a novelty, but an expectation. Her ranking dropped to 45 after Miami. A 16-spot slide from her career best, the largest single-week drop on the WTA in that window. Yet rankings are snapshots, not portraits. What the numbers fail to capture is the adaptive intelligence that Eala has been displaying, the way she modifies her court position from match to match, depending on the opponent's tendencies, the way she uses her left-handed serve on the ad side to jam right-handers into awkward returns. Rankings do not account for trajectory, and Eala's trajectory is aimed straight at the upper echelon. Which brings us to Linz. The Upper Austria Ladies Linz, a WTA 500 event being held from April 6th through the 12th at the Design Center Linz, marks a pivotal transition point in Eala's season, and it carries a twist that makes the tactical analysis even more interesting. For the first time in the tournament's 35-year history, it is being played on clay. Indoor red clay, to be specific. This is not the surface where Eala has built her reputation. Her biggest results have come on hard courts, where her flat ball striking and quick reflexes translate most naturally into winning patterns. Clay demands something different. Clay demands patience, footwork that slides rather than stops, and an ability to construct points through heavy rotation rather than flat pace. It is, in many ways, a referendum on whether Eala's game has a second gear. She is seeded 7th at Linz, which is itself a remarkable sentence for a Filipino tennis player in a WTA 500 draw. The field around her is serious. Defending champion Ekaterina Alexandrova sits at the top as the first seed, with Klara Tauson at 2, Ludmila Samsonova at 3, and Yelena Ostapenko, always a threat on any surface where she can uncork that thermonuclear forehand, at 4. Katie Boulter and Karolina Pliskova, using a protected ranking, have entered the draw as well. This is not a soft field. This is not a backdraw at a 250 somewhere. Eala will need to fight through legitimate opposition to go deep, and every round she wins will be a statement about her adaptability. But the conversation that has truly electrified the tennis community extends far beyond Linz itself. It is about what happens when Eala's upward trajectory and Sabalenka's dominant reign eventually intersect. Because they will. The mathematics of the rankings almost guarantee it. And the question of how Eala would approach a match against the world number 1 is not an abstract thought experiment anymore. It is a tactical puzzle with real contours and real answers. Consider what Sabalenka does better than anyone in the world right now. She hits the ball harder from the baseline than any woman playing the sport. Her first serve, when it lands, is close to unhittable. She has rebuilt her second serve after the yips that plagued her earlier in her career, and it now carries enough pace and spin to function as an offensive weapon rather than a liability. Her movement, once considered a weakness, has improved to the point where she can absorb rallies and redirect pace with a composure that would have been unthinkable 3 years ago. And her mental fortitude, tested in Grand Slam finals, in sunshine double pressure, in the relentless grind of defending a number 1 ranking for 76 consecutive weeks, is perhaps her most formidable asset. She does not buckle. Not anymore. So how does someone like Eala even begin to construct a blueprint against that? The answer lies in the margins, in the specific geometric and temporal disruptions that a left-hander can create against a right-handed baseline destroyer. First, the serve. Eala's left-handed delivery naturally curves away from a right-hander's forehand on the deuce side and jams into the body on the ad side. Against someone like Sabalenka, who loads up her return stance with the expectation of receiving right-handed spin, this creates a fractional delay in racket preparation. Fractional, yes, but at the elite level, fractions are everything. If Eala can consistently land first serves into the Sabalenka forehand with that leftward curve, she forces adjustments that the Belarusian does not have to make against 90% of the tour. Second, the rally patterns. Eala's forehand cross-court, struck from the left side, naturally tracks into Sabalenka's backhand. While Sabalenka's backhand is no weakness, it is not the shot she builds her game around. Her forehand is the weapon, the shot that ends rallies and shifts momentum. If Eala can sustain cross-court exchanges that pin Sabalenka to the backhand side, she denies the world number one her primary weapon and forces her to create from a position of relative disadvantage. This is not about overpowering Sabalenka. Nobody overpowers Sabalenka. This is about redirecting the geometry of the rally so that raw power becomes less relevant. Third, and perhaps most crucially, is the dimension of variety. Eala's time at the Nadal Academy has given her a clay court sensibility that includes the slice backhand, the drop shot, and the occasional net approach that most modern baseliners treat as an artifact from a previous era. Against a player like Sabalenka, who thrives in rhythmic baseline exchanges where she can time her swings and load her shots, disruption is the only viable strategy. Change the speed. Change the spin. Change the height of the ball over the net. Make every rally feel different from the one before. This is how you unsettle a frontrunner, and Eala's shot selection suggests she understands this intuitively. Of course, understanding it and executing it under the pressure of a live match against the most dominant player on the planet are two very different things. The gap between Eala at 45 in the world and Sabalenka at number 1 is not merely numerical, it is experiential. Sabalenka has played and won Grand Slam finals. She has navigated the unique psychological hell of being the hunted, of having every opponent raise their game against her, and she has not just survived it but thrived. Eala has not yet been tested at that altitude. Her losses to Noskova and Machova in recent weeks suggest that when the pace escalates beyond a certain threshold, her flat ball striking can become a liability as much as an asset, especially when the opponent's weight of shot pushes her behind the baseline and compresses her preparation time. And yet, there is something happening with Eala that defies the usual cautionary narrative about young players taking their lumps before contending. Her win-loss record in 2026 stands at 14-8. That is a 63% winning rate, which is solid but not spectacular in isolation. What makes it remarkable is the quality of opposition she has beaten: Paolini, Yastremska, Sirsti, among others, and the stages on which she has beaten them. She is not padding her record against qualifiers at small events. She is showing up at the biggest tournaments on the calendar and trading punches with players ranked significantly above her, and she is winning enough of those exchanges to keep climbing. The Linz Open is not where Eala will face Sabalenka. The world number 1 is not in this draw. She is scheduled for Stuttgart the following week, and then Madrid, where she has won 3 times. But Linz represents something arguably more important for this particular chapter of Eala's development. It is the first real test of whether her game translates to clay in a high-stakes environment. If she can navigate the slower surface, if she can add topspin to her naturally flat shots without losing the penetration that makes her dangerous, if she can slide into her ground strokes and use the clay to extend rallies she might not win on hard courts, then the range of her game expands dramatically, and the prospect of her troubling the very best on any surface moves from hypothetical to plausible. Eala arrived back at the Nadal Academy just days ago to begin her clay court preparations. There is something poetic about the setting, the same facility where she came as a 13-year-old. Dreaming impossible dreams, now welcoming her back as a top 50 professional preparing for a stretch of tournaments that could define her season. Iga Swiatek is reportedly also training at the academy, which means Eala may be hitting with one of the greatest clay court players of this generation as she fine-tunes her transition. The value of that kind of practice partner cannot be overstated. The broader narrative at play here transcends any single match or tournament. What Eala is doing, what she represents, has no precedent in Philippine sports history. The Philippines has produced boxing legends, basketball players who have electrified domestic leagues, and swimmers who have competed at the Olympics. But a top 30 professional tennis player? Never. Not once. The infrastructure for developing tennis talent in the Philippines is sparse compared to the factory systems of France, Russia, or the United States. Eala is essentially a solo pioneer, a player who had to leave her country at 13 to access the coaching, the facilities, and the competitive ecosystem required to nurture a professional career. Every ranking point she earns is etched against a backdrop of structural disadvantage that players from traditional tennis nations never have to confront. This context matters when we talk about a potential clash with Sabalenka because it speaks to the psychological makeup of a competitor who has been defying expectations since before most people knew her name. When you have spent your entire developmental years proving that someone from your country can do this, can compete at this level, can beat seeded players at Grand Slams, can crack the top 30, you develop a relationship with doubt that is fundamentally different from a player who grew up expecting to be here. Eala does not play with the burden of expectation. She plays with the freedom of someone who has already exceeded every reasonable projection for her career and who therefore has nothing to lose in any given moment on court. That mentality is precisely what makes her dangerous against a player like Sabalenka. The world number one thrives when opponents are tentative, when they respect her power too much and retreat behind the baseline, hoping to survive rather than competing to win. Eala does not play tentative tennis. Her positioning on the baseline is aggressive, often standing inside or on the line to take the ball early. Her return stance is forward-leaning, designed to cut off service time rather than absorb it. These are not the habits of a player who is intimidated by reputation. Looking ahead, if Eala performs well at Linz and carries that form into Stuttgart and Madrid, the scenario in which she draws Sabalenka at a WTA 1000 event or even at Roland Garros becomes increasingly realistic. And in that scenario, with her confidence inflated by a successful clay court transition and her ranking potentially climbing back toward the top 30, the match would not be the walkover that the ranking gap suggests. It would be a collision between the most dominant force in women's tennis and the most intriguing emerging talent, a player whose left-handed geometry, fearless court positioning, and historical underdog mentality combine to create a stylistic profile that is uniquely calibrated to cause problems. Will she actually destroy Sabalenka? Destroy is a strong word, and the honest answer is that Sabalenka at her current level is close to unbeatable for anyone, let alone a player who has never faced her. But the honest answer also includes this. If any rising player on the WTA Tour has the specific tactical ingredients to make Sabalenka uncomfortable, to force her out of rhythm, to turn a match into something she did not anticipate, it might just be the left-hander from the Philippines who has been defying logic and rewriting history at every turn. The Linz Open begins on April 6th. Eala's clay court chapter starts there, and everything that follows, Stuttgart, Madrid, and the road to Roland Garros, will tell us whether the whispers about her potential to disrupt the established order have substance behind them. Keep watching. This story is far from finished, and the next twist might be the most dramatic one yet.